evening, depending on wherever you are in the world. My name is Dr. Pankaj Viz, and I'm the co-founder of Crack the Wellness Code. I am a practicing internal medicine physician for over 20 years in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I also run this health promotion platform where we bring actionable, evidence-based information, science-based information to you, our audience, our community all over the world, so that we can give you nuggets of wisdom from the smartest people in the world to make your life better so that you can live to your highest potential. With that theme in mind, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome my friend, my partner, and my guest for our masterclass that we're starting today. I'm delighted to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Indranill Basu-Ray, who is a very well-respected worldwide expert in electrophysiology, which is one of the newest branches of cardiology. But besides that, the reason that I'm really excited is that he's an author, a researcher, and a meditator for over 3 decades. Dr. Basu-Ray is a scientist, and our exposition is about yogic sciences. He's trained in medicine, in cardiology, and cardiac electrophysiology from India and the US, with his US training being at Harvard, Tulane, and the Texas Heart Institute, as well as Baylor College of Medicine, all top institutions in the United States. Besides that, he's a practicing yogi initiated into Kriya Yoga by the venerable Kriya Yoga master Swami Hariharananda Giri, who instructed him to be a cardiologist and spread the science of yoga all over the world. And that's what he's done. But that's not all. He's one of 7 cardiologists who wrote down the practice guidelines for physicians on behalf of the American Heart Association on the role of meditation in cardiovascular disease. Dr. Basu-Ray is the editor of the world's first book on the role of yoga, as we call it, yoga in cardiovascular disease, the principle and practice of yoga in cardiovascular medicine.
So it's a pleasure to be with you guys here and with such a beautiful organization that is spreading nice scientific ways of using yoga for not only staying healthy, but also conquering diseases that really wrecks our environment, our planet today, with more than 65 to 70% death coming from these diseases. So it's my pleasure and my privilege to be with you today, Pankaj.
Starting with my first question, which is, what is yoga? Because my understanding is I see a patient who comes with low back pain or neck pain, and I give them some YouTube videos and tell them to go stretch their neck or go stretch their back and go do these yoga stretches. And that's what a lot of people understand as what yoga is, a bunch of stretches or asanas, postures that can help you to be more limber and flexible. But in my conversations from you, I'm understanding that there's a lot more to the story.
So yoga is basically a philosophy that takes care of the mind, the body in a way that you can live a long life completely disease-free. So what it does is it brings up those nuances that is important in a daily lifestyle. What should you eat? What should you sleep? How you should do physical exercises? How should you reduce stress? And the fine part is that today, with development of science, in the sense that we now have imaging inside the brain, we can find what are the genetic sequencing, we can know what are the genes and how they are reflecting in the body through epigenetics. We have in the last 10 years have found out that yoga does much more than that. Yoga can completely change your brain. Yoga can completely change the epigenetic of your genes, which will, as we shall explain later on, if you can change the epigenetics, you can change how your gene behaves. Because suppose if you have a bad gene, not necessarily it will be active, and there may be means by which you can shut it off. So yes, so it's basically a philosophy that deals with the human being reaching the next paradigm, a paradigm of being healthy, being happy, decreasing aging, and living a life that is completely free of diseases.
What are the limbs of yoga? So if it's not just asana, what are the other things, and sort of how do we put a structure to it. I've heard something about 8 limbs.
Correct. So you're absolutely right, Dr. Viz. There are 8 limbs of yoga, and each of these 8 limbs are equally important, other than the last limb about which we will talk about that. That's what is called the change of consciousness. We'll come to that. But the other 7 limbs is something that everybody can practice. So the first limb is yama, which means certain basic protocols in life that you have to follow. The second is also called niyama, which is again certain basic protocols like you don't steal, you tell the truth. You might say, why is that important? That is important because if I'm telling you a lie, it's amply clear that there are changes in the body and the brain. And that's how actually they use the lie detector for criminals.
Mm-hmm.
Because we believe that if I'm telling you a lie, it doesn't matter. What does it matter? But what we don't understand is, and that's what yoga or the rishis or the people who discovered yoga thousands of years back understood, that when I lie, there is change in my brain, there's change in my body, there's change even in my skin. And that's what is picked up by the detectors, because lie detectors don't get into your brain to find out if you're lying or not. They find out what is happening with your skin. So there is change in your entire nervous system called the autonomic nervous system. So these yogis who had practiced and meditated for hundreds of years and gathered this knowledge found out that any behavior that is aberrant to a normal living actually decreases your life. When you get stressed out, when even you something as menial as small as just telling a single lie can actually cause release of chemical from your brain and your skin and your body, certain hormones like cortisol, which can actually decrease your immunity. No wonder that's why Gautama Buddha is supposed to have said, though I don't know if it's actually he or somebody else, that if you live on earth, pain is mandatory, but suffering is optional. Right. So this is niyama and yama. Then comes your asanas, which every of us know, practicing postures. Then comes, very importantly, breathing techniques called pranayama. So pranayama, unfortunately, is really not breathing. Pranayama is controlling of pranayama. The person who introduced Eastern philosophy to the West, Swami Vivekananda, clearly said that unlike what we think, pranayama is not breathing. Pranayama is controlling the life force. And there are evidences now through science that different breathing techniques can not only change your mentality, change your brain, reconstitute your brain, but also change the activation of your nervous system, including your autonomic nervous system. And there are certain breathing techniques, very esoteric breathing techniques, which if you use, you can increase the release of nitric oxide and such chemicals in your vascular system, which will decrease your chance of having stroke, heart attacks, and a bunch of other vascular problems. So that's pranayama. Then comes pratyahara, which means concentration. And concentration means you bring your mind off all the stressful thing and try to concentrate. And then comes dharana, which is mindfulness. Mindfulness is a practice that you bring your concentration to a single point so that anything that is stressful doesn't get predominance in your brain. And as you practice mindfulness for a long time, we now know that there is complete change in not only brain chemistry, but also firing of neurons inside your brain. That's what is called neuroplasticity. So somebody who's very stressful, who gets stressed out with minimum problems or minimal events, can practice this for 4 to 6 weeks, and there are evidences that not only can he change what predominant neurotransmitter he releases, but also his neuronal firings can be changed inside his brain. And then comes the last but not the least, one of the most powerful technique, which is called meditation or dhyana or meditation. These are the 7 techniques that everybody can practice every day, every minute of their life. The last one is called samadhi, which in English language, the closest word I can have for this is called changing of your level of consciousness. So we exist in different levels of consciousness according to yogic philosophy. When you practice these techniques, you can change your paradigm of existence to a different level when none of these stressful things affect you at all. And that's called change of consciousness or samadhi. That's the eighth or the complete or the last limb of Ashtanga Yoga. So in short, you can practice all the 7 limbs, which will lead to you reaching the 8th limb, which is a complete paradigm change in your entire existence and your interaction with the stressful world, which is the most important part, the most important effect of yoga as such. We are stressed out either consciously or subconsciously 24/7, 365. So if we practice yoga only 1 hour a day, of course, it spills into couple of hours. So you are protected by more than that 1 hour. You will be protected for many hours. But if you want to be protected 24/7, 365, you have to be in mindfulness. And mindfulness makes sure that this dangerous chemical that we are talking about, they are lethal chemicals. I mean, like interleukin-6, they damage your heart, they damage your lungs. And we know that from COVID, that these chemicals, when they're released in large amounts, can burn your lungs in 5 days. That's what we saw when COVID first came up. So these chemical release can be decreased or completely erased if you practice mindfulness 24/7, 365. And that's why we say yoga is not going to a gym. You can sit and I'm talking to you, a part of my brain should be completely mindful, because only then I can prevent any form of diseases that you see commonly due to when you don't practice yoga. So yes, it is something that needs to be practiced 24/7, 365. And it's easy to do that. It's just a question of practice. You can do everything that you're doing even better than what you're doing now, because your mind is concentrated. At the same time, you can remain in mindfulness, which will be not only keeping you healthy and happy and disease-free, but actually increases your concentration. Because when we do a particular work, 60 to 70% of our brain is thinking about everything else. Oh, what happened? I have to go to school. Tomorrow I have to do this. Day after tomorrow I have to do this. So you're really not concentrating. But when you are mindful, you're not only keeping yourself healthy, but you're also concentrating more on the work you're doing. So of course, the results are much better. I start with something a little more easier, because being non-judgmental, I think, in my opinion, takes some time. It's not very easy to do, because not only should you be non-judgmental, but you have to be non-judgmental even at your subconscious level. So sometimes what happens, you will see that something happens and suddenly you start feeling not bad, or somebody says something, you don't feel bad. So judgmental or being non-judgmental has also a subconscious connotation, and that takes years to learn. But if I can use a very simple practice, and we know some of these practices, where you try to stay in the now, in the present moment, that itself practice will make sure that with passage of time, as you practice and practice, you'll learn that you'll become non-judgmental automatically. Because in the present moment, there cannot be a judgment. I mean, you can judge whether your past is well, the decisions that you have taken is right or wrong, the guy who spoke to you, whether he behaved properly with you or not. Or you can think about the future and say, what you will do tomorrow, day after tomorrow, will you achieve your goals or not? But if you're in the present moment happening now, slowly you'll learn that being judgmental doesn't make sense, because it's now. So whatever your mind thinks will be the only truth, because you have no control over your past. What has happened has happened. You might try to change it in the future, but you can't change whatever past has happened. You cannot decide your future, because what you decide you're going to do may or may not happen. But what you're doing now, you can completely change, and no God or a super being in the earth or heaven or anywhere else can make you change that, because you're in complete charge of your presence. So that's how I start, and then slowly you get the practice of becoming non-judgmental, and it's a couple of steps from there.
So what I'm hearing from you is that we talk about mind, body, spirit, but what I'm hearing is that the mind aspect of changes that happen in the mind are much more powerful and much more important than just the physical aspects of maintaining a certain posture or causing a certain amount of stretch and strain in the joints or in the muscles.
That is absolutely true, because we are what our mind thinks. So it is scientifically, it's, as you know, you're a physician also. Mind, last 2000 years, initially we thought that a few diseases from the mind creates diseases in the body, and we used to call them psychosomatic illness. Today we know that every moment there is interchange between the mind and the body and the mind. Everything that happens in the mind is related to the body, and body accordingly reacts to it. Everything that happens in the body is related to the mind, and mind reacts to it. So physical exercises increases your flexibility, decreases a couple of diseases, but is only 5 to 10% of yoga. 90% of yoga is the other practices. For example, breathing techniques that decreases sympathetic drive and increases parasympathetic drive, and which itself decreases your chance of developing heart failure, your chance of having sudden cardiac death, which is the commonest cause of death in America. Every 2 minutes, an American dies due to sudden cardiac death. There are over 350,000 deaths every year in just America alone. And that's all because of sympathetic overactivity, which you can block by practicing certain breathing techniques. When you practice mindfulness, meditation, and concentration, that is pratyahara, dharana, and dhyana, you can completely block off all the toxic chemical released in your brain, because it is important to understand where this comes from. And we will talk more when we talk about how stress damages. But the fact is that when we have stress, the body understands that you're in danger. You're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. You have to run. Now, so it releases chemicals which shuts off a lot of important functions in the body so that you can concentrate only on running away from the predator. So many important functions are stopped. Heart is made to beat much faster than that is required. Important organs of the body, like the brain, kidneys, get less blood flow because blood is diverted towards organs like your legs, because you need to run away from the predator. Now, when you're angry with your boss, or when you're jealous of your friend who has got a promotion and you have not, neither are you running away from a predator, nor is your life in danger. But unfortunately, these complex emotions have the same reaction for the body and the mind. So mind makes your body behave in the same way as if you are being chased by a predator. So it is very important to understand that just doing physical exercises is highly restricted, though there has been studies, say, for example, comparing asanas, that is yoga, with Pilates or Zumba for controlling hypertension, and it was found that yoga is much better. So imagine that if yoga is much better than these other physical exercises, and even that is only 5% of yoga, imagine the amount of benefit you will get if you practice 100% of yoga, which is other things, including modulated breathing, concentration, mindfulness, and meditation together, the amount of benefit you will develop.
How does one begin, right? You could rent a car and just drive through rural America, and there's a yoga studio in almost every little town, which may not even have a school, but there's a yoga studio. So how do we know what we're getting, right? There's so many certifications. There are all kinds of teachers and gurus. There's different certifying organizations like CRYT, IAYT, Vayu. And it seems like it's such a business, and to open a yoga studio, and you can have people come and again do those classes for an hour, and it's kind of gimmicky here in the United States. And I'm sure in India it's a similar situation, with so many babas and gurus claiming to be the expert who can show you the way. So how does someone like me begin?
Yeah, that's a very important question, and I completely agree with you. So the phenomena that we are seeing is because yoga has got popular, people want to make a fast buck out of it. So everybody opens up a studio and teaches, even for taken for granted that they teach the right asanas. Even then, your benefit is only 5 to 10%, whereas most people don't even know correct asanas, so they're even worse. And the important part is that just doing asanas benefit also decrease, even if you do it correctly, until you modulate it with your breathing. is this combination that makes a difference. And third thing is, as you correctly said, is that as you modulate the asanas, that covers you for that 4 to 5 p.m. that you're doing it. What about the rest of the day? So that doesn't protect you from the rest of the day. But yes, the level of knowledge needed is much more than what can be offered in a yoga studio. And a lot of people who, as I said, there are different certifications, but all the certifications you have to remember is mostly for asanas, that you can do, like, for example, 400 hours, 200 hours yoga teachers training. What do they teach? They teach some philosophy, but those philosophy is, it's like, I ask you, I'm telling you that I'm going to take you to a cruise along the Pacific Ocean, and I just take you to the beach and get your feet wet in the tide, and then I say, oh, this is Pacific Ocean. So that's unfortunately the truth with most of the yoga studios and yoga certification. So I think people who are in this, who are academics, need to get more involved. Physicians need to get more involved. Yoga till now has been exclusively in the hands of people who are not physicians, who don't understand human physiology, who don't understand medicine. Yoga, as I said, is a complete medical, it's a part in medicine. It is completely, yoga therapy has nothing to do with just physical exercises. So unless doctors like you and me get aggressively involved in teaching yoga to our patients and make sure that the patient gets benefited from them, you will have charlatans making a quick buck by fooling people, as you see. So the quick way is, number one, most people who are offering classes and asking you money for that is they're trying to make a quick buck. Number two is, ask them, are they teaching you meditation? Are they teaching you diet therapy? Are they teaching you exercises based on what your problem is? Do they have a medical degree or at least a nursing degree where they understand human physiology? And medical degree doesn't have to be allopathic. There are people in this country who are naturopath. There are people in India who are Ayurveda, but they are trained in 4.5 to 5 years in medicine. So you have to have medical training before you're explaining somebody what yoga they need to do for their diseases to keep themselves healthy. Just going to a yoga studio and learning how to stand on your head doesn't do you any good. And in fact, some people can have a stroke or a bleed inside their brain when they're made to do this. Because the level of intelligence and the level of knowledge that most of the yoga teachers have is appalling. I'm not saying everybody. There are a lot of people who are highly trained, who are highly educated, and they do a great job. But some of them are appalling. And you fall prey to them. Not only you lose money, but at the same time, you really don't get any benefit. So that's the reason why I would be skeptical with down the road yoga studio and going to them. And I would rather get institutions which teach yoga, which have yoga practitioners, look for physicians who are trained and who are willing to teach yoga, whether in India, whether in this country, and go for them. And certainly avoid any cults, because yoga is beyond cults, you see. So what has happened, as you correctly said, there are a lot of gurus in India, and some of them run a cult. They give a new name to the Ashtanga yoga or the classical yoga of Patanjali, and they sell it as a brand and make money out of it. I'd stay out from that, because yoga should be available free of. I might charge you for my time, but I should not be charging you for yoga, because I did not discover yoga. I did not invent yoga. Practices are there for hundreds and thousands of years. There are many good books on that. All that you need is a guide who can teach you how to do it properly. So anybody who charges a large amount of money for doing this should be kept at bay. And that's the only way by which you learn, and learn from the right place. And to some extent, it is you got to try out. And that's what once upon a time, yoga, a root things about yoga is, you have to find a guru. How do you find a guru? Yoga says, try and test your guru. And if you think the person knows what he is doing, you'll get it. You'll understand that in a couple of days or weeks. And if you think he does not, change your guru.
Get yourself harmed in the process. You also said that there's specific exercises, specific process, depending on what the student is looking for. Could we talk about that a little bit? For example, if a lot of
Yeah.
our community is dealing with diabetes, or they're obese, or they have, heart problems, how would
Yeah. So, for example, if somebody comes with me with, say, hypertension, you can make him or her do 24/6, 24/7, 365 different asanas. His hypertension will not go. Why? Because a large part of hypertension is because of your autonomic activity as well as your stress in your brain. So I have to give him breathing techniques that will cause relaxation of his blood vessels, which will release nitric oxide. I have to give him specialized breathing technique that will tend to improve his parasympathetic discharge rather than sympathetic discharge. I will have to give him meditation which will bring down his stress. So if I think, and I am down the road yoga studio minting money showing people how to stand on their head, he can stand on his head the whole day and he'll end up getting a clot in his brain or a hemorrhage in his brain, because people with high blood pressure are not supposed to do that. So the problem is that every disease has certain nuances that you as a clinician should know. So that's what in medicine, as you know very well, Pankaj, that we have something called masterly inactivity, which means in some diseases, you just don't do anything, because doing active does not mean always doing good. And in those diseases, not doing anything itself is a medical decision. But you can only have that medical decision only when you know the anatomy, the physiology, the pathology, and that patient in particular. And that patient who needs a masterly inactivity, his brother, who's maybe the same age, maybe the twin brother, may require something different. So these nuances cannot be understood by the down the street yoga teacher, because they don't have this amount of knowledge. So that amount of knowledge makes the crucial differences between somebody who can use yoga for his benefit in having a disease-free life, and rather than having a teacher who can only teach you how to maybe a little more flexible by making you bend your bones, bend your leg, bend your neck, and stuff like that.
everybody's asking right now is, where am I supposed to go? Because 99% of options available for me to go start practicing yoga are going to be, somebody who has some certification after 200 hours of, training by someone else who's also had 200 hours of training. So it's almost like a Ponzi scheme. So where do I go? I mean, where do I find? There's only one Dr. Basu-Ray, and not everybody can go to him. So where do we find these people?
So I think that's why yoga in every country, they are trying to set up standards, so that, and in United States of America, we need to set up standards immediately. I mean, as you know more than me, that for every disease, we have guidelines set up by physicians. So why not guidelines for the biggest lifestyle medicine in the world, yoga? So we need to have guidelines, and we are working on some of these guidelines. Maybe in the future, we'll start having those, because without having guidelines, what happens is every Tom, Dick, and Harry practices whatever they feel like, and they go on fooling people like Ponzi schemes, that this is what I know, and what I know is the best in the world, and you'll benefit from me only and nobody else. In medicine, it doesn't happen like that. I might have 40 years of practice, still my practice may not be appropriate. But when 4 doctors, 10 doctors, 15 doctors sit together and come out with an idea that this is the basic guidelines, these are the parameters, you may not be very specific, but at least you have to draw the perimeter, that this is my land, this is where I can make a house, and this is the perimeter of my property. So once you have the perimeter set up, then people understands that they have to be within that perimeter to make their teaching viable and actually beneficial, rather than everybody teaching whatever they feel like or whatever their knowledge is, and fooling people that this is the only true path.
At this point, I'm just going to do a very quick summary of what our topics are going to be for this series, so that people have some excitement over what's coming up. We talked a lot about stress reduction, and I think that's going to be the key thing. That's the whole foundation in my mind to how all of this works. And I think you expounded on that beautifully, that this is a mind science. It's not as so much a body science, but it's more about mind, body, spirit, with mind being the foundation. So I think next session, we should really talk about the role of yoga in stress reduction. But some of the other really exciting topics are the role of yoga in gene expression. You talked about epigenetics and how we can switch on and off gene signals that turn on disease or health. So that's the role of yoga in gene expression. The third topic is the role of yoga in brain function in development, which is so important. We see so many degenerative brain diseases, from Parkinson's, ALS, to Alzheimer's, dementia, that's affecting such a large population, especially as the population worldwide gets older. So the role of yoga in brain function and development. And then non-communicable diseases, which are huge, right? The WHO classifies non-communicable diseases as the biggest killers, and they really eat up the most of our healthcare budgets as well. So yoga for non-communicable diseases such as heart disease and respiratory diseases, which is lung. And then we're going to talk about lifestyle modification, including diet for disease prevention. And this is my favorite topic. I think food is medicine. And we'll talk about lifestyle modification, including diet for disease prevention. And we'll do 2 parts on that. And then we'll talk about yoga for diabetes prevention, for hypertension control, which we touched upon a little bit. And finally, yoga for heart disease management, which is, of course, your forte. So we have some really, really, really exciting topics coming up. In conclusion for today, would you like to sum up with sort of 3 key takeaways?
Yeah, the 3 takeaways are: number 1, yoga is the most powerful medicine known to mankind based on the latest research. Number 2, yoga is more than just doing physical exercises. And to take benefit from yoga, you need to use all the arms of yoga. And there are 7 different arms that you can use. You have to use all of them to the full extent. Last but not the least, because yoga is more than just physical exercises, going to a studio and learning some physical techniques, it doesn't help much. It does help, but not much. If you have to take the full evidence of full benefit of yoga based on latest research evidence, you got to go to a practitioner who himself understands and can teach you these different techniques so that you can get the complete benefit of yoga. With today's problems, including financial distress, a lot of countries have gone into recession, pandemics, it's important that yoga can be a saving light, but that will only be true if you understand and take advantage of every aspects of yoga other than just learning some physical exercises.
Add my point, which is that something that you said, which was the absolute brilliant spark of light for me today, which was that this is something that we practice 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days. So it's something that we do all the time, and it's a way of life. It is the original lifestyle medicine. And you just said that it's not just the physical aspect, it's mind, body, spirit. We talked about setting yoga standards. We talked about the fact that this is a science with both body and mind implications, and that cults and gurus who don't understand the physiological aspects of yoga need to be shunned, and we need to take over because this is a science and we need to have guidelines and parameters. It's a way of life, and it's not hard to adopt. We don't need to go to any special place. It is something that when we can start, I can start today. It is the most ancient and powerful lifestyle medicine. And as you said, we use all 8 arms of yoga to extract the maximum benefit. And if we want to go to a practitioner, find one who understands physiology and the various facets of yoga, the 7 limbs, 8 limbs really, and really get to the best version of yourself that you can be, so that you can do more good, to be around, to be alive, to have more energy, more years in your life, more life in your years, so that we can give back and do more good for the people around us.